The following story is true. It's part of an active and ongoing investigation, and if you have any information that could be helpful, contact your local FBI office or visit tips.fbi.gov. This show may not be suitable for all audiences.
We're watching a video. It's from February 16th, 2012, Aledo, Texas. A fireman adjusts the camera, and then a house comes into view, engulfed in flames.
Where did you need the brush? On the other side? There's a small driveway here, there's a small shed down there.
It's what firemen call fully involved.
If you want, I can give you arson in Texas. I burned a house down, but I want a cigar for it.
How did you break in?
Then I got into the garage, and there were some tools and stuff and some gas. That's kind of when I started getting the idea to burn the house.
How long do you think you were in there?
I don't know, maybe an hour or two that morning.
How did you start the fire?
Once I decided to burn it, I opened up the attic access and opened up all the windows around the house on the inside. Grabbed a bunch of clothes and made a trail of clothes and bedding and stuff from every room, like to different parts of the house, and poured gas on the clothes all the way out to the back door, and then just lit it from the back door, and it went up really fast.
So then you watched for a while, you said?
There was a church there up on a hill, and I parked up by the church and had some binoculars with me and started watching the fire and kind of lost track of time.
Have you ever lost control? I have.
So have I. It means different things for different people. It can be good, a healthy release, or it can be self-destructive.
Not long after he killed Samantha Koenig in Alaska, and before his capture in Texas, Israel Keyes completely lost control.
And his version? It looked like chaos. It was flames, it was robbery, and it was stalking.
Authorities also believe it was murder, his last.
In the interrogation room, they play a game of Israel's making.
They're bobbing and weaving, chiseling away at his defenses. What they don't know is that they're running out of time.
We're all wired differently. Some of us are wired for good, some of us are wired for bad. But a select few step outside all of society's boundaries. From Cold Open Media, this is Deviant. Israel Keyes.
I haven't been lied to you since I started telling the truth, to put it that way.
Part 6. Welcome back to Deviant. I'm Andrew Iden.
And I'm Dan Semitovich. Thank you so much for being here with us again. And if you haven't already, please follow the show on your favorite podcast app. That way, you'll never miss an episode. And you can see some of the stuff we're talking about by visiting our socials. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at deviant.podcast. And if you want even more behind-the-scenes material, check out our Patreon. It's full of the videos we're talking about and the documents we're looking at, and it'll give you an additional glimpse into the stories we're telling, and you'll also get access to exclusive chats with me and Andrew. So visit our Patreon by going to deviantpodcast.com. It's a great way to support the show, and you'll be able to see all the stuff that's waiting there for you. But now, let's get into the show.
On May 23rd, 2012, Israel Keyes is in the last place he'd find any semblance of control. He's sitting in a federal courtroom. Finally, he's before a judge in a hearing about him and his crimes. Former Anchorage police detective Jeff Bell was there too.
I'm sitting in the hearing. The first hearing, I think that James Koenig was going to be there, and we had heard some rumblings that James Koenig was going to bring his friends to the hearing, and there potentially could be a disruption. So I called the Marshal's Service and said, I think we should have a lot of security at this hearing. I think this could be a volatile hearing. So they had a lot of security and marshals in there, and they have obviously one sitting right next to him. And I was sitting in the galley and I was watching him, and he was very attentive to a very attractive female who was sitting to my right, a couple rows back behind me, younger gal. He kept staring at her, and So much so that I was concerned that he was fantasizing or something with her, trying to get her attention.
Filed shortly after the court issued
Just as he's been doing for the past few months, he takes a big risk. He bolts, like literally bolts.
That at this particular juncture, we're not.
It's a last gasp, Hail Mary, run for the door. FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin.
Just pretty crazy. I have never had anybody try to do that, especially with that many people in the courtroom. I mean, there was no chance of him getting out of the building. It was just pretty crazy that he even tried to.
He ran right into my arms. So what he did was, unbeknownst to us, he was there several hours early, and he was sitting in the courthouse cell. They give you a lunch. They give you a carton of milk and an apple and a sandwich wrapped in cellophane. And so he's sitting down in that cell, and with the time on his hand, he apparently figured out that the grommet of the chain that holds the two ankle locks together was, to him, it seemed loose. And so he sat there for hours and wiggled that grommet out of one of those shackles, out of the hole. So he was able to disconnect the two leg irons. He then took his cellophane and he wound it very tightly into like a string. And he tied the chain to his other bracelet, knowing that as soon as he would start to run, that would break and he would have, full access to run.
And that attractive woman he was eyeing in the gallery, it turns out that his thinking has nothing to do with what she looks like. It was all about where she was, according to Keyes at least.
In reality, when I interviewed him later, what he was doing was trying to scare her into moving, because she was in the path that he was going to take to escape. And his plan was to jump the initial wall that they have, which is about 3 feet, and then high step on the back of the chairs to the door. And so when I saw him doing this, I moved my location and I sat right in front of her, so that instead of looking at her, he'd have to look at me. About the time I did that, I'm sitting there and all of a sudden he turned and jumped the wall. And the marshal that was immediately to him got a hold of him somehow. And I was like the second row back, and he essentially ran right into my arms, grabbed him. We took him to the ground. And by then there was another marshal or two. He got tased by one of the marshals with a taser, and he only made it 2 rows.
The first thing I got to tell you, Israel, we talked about a little bit earlier. That stunt yesterday in the courtroom did not go over well.
With who?
Well, with a lot of folks, not the least of which were the prosecutors. One of them was in court, and the other one said, what the fuck, after yesterday. So they didn't think that was too funny.
Why are they afraid I'd actually get away?
I was involved in interviewing him within an hour of the escape attempt to try to figure that out. And he thought the whole thing was super funny, and talked to him about the shackles. And he says, I don't know if I want to admit to that. We're going to charge me with destruction of property. And he'd laugh, I said, did you really think you were going to get away? Did you not see all the security there and stuff? And he said, well, even if I had a 1% chance, that was more of a chance than I had not doing it. And so, what did he have to lose, right? That's what he said.
This is another example of Israel Keyes being Israel Keyes. He does things because he wants to do them, even while in police custody.
After he fails to escape, he's right back where he started, in a room full of police and lawyers, asking him questions.
Look, Dan, you and I disagree on a lot of things, right?
But we also agree on a lot of things. You like baseball.
Right. We like a good whiskey.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Oh, God, I hope not.
But also, I think one of the things we both can agree on is that we love Quince. Look, there's a million places where you can get things on the internet.
Yes.
It's an endless black hole. But if you go to Quince, that endless black hole may stop. Because when I started shopping at Quince, I found some things I was like, this is exactly what I need. For instance, I just told my wife the other day, I said, we need a new chef's knife. I'm sifting through Quince, and I'm going through the clothes and the luggage, and I was like, wait, there's a great 8-inch chef's knife. And sure enough, I bought one, and it's fantastic.
And I was thinking that I need a new bag for taking Gnocchi on walks. Gnocchi is our Great Dane. He's 150 pounds of pure sweetness. He's a little bit of a neighborhood celebrity. Anyway, when you walk a Great Dane, you need a lot of supplies. And sort of sling bag that I was using for him, a little chintzy. I prefer something higher quality, higher fashion. And I was like, maybe Quince has that. And that's when I ended up picking up the Revive nylon fold-over crossbody bag. And now I have all the space I need, and it looks great. And the best part about it is that it didn't cost me a lot. I was willing to pay more, but all Quince items are really priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd expect to pay for similar brands.
Go to Quince. You're going to find something that you want or something you need, like I did. And you can go to quince.com/deviant for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/deviant to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/deviant.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
It's a heavy time, man. The world is heavy. The things we watch, listen to, see, read, it's heavy. It's got weight. That stuff piles up on your shoulders, piles up in your brain.
Sometimes you need professional help with someone who knows what they're talking about. And BetterHelp is a great place to find someone like that.
And honestly, I think oftentimes finding someone is the biggest hurdle. When you talk to people about this, it's like, I got to find somebody. I got to call. I got to make an appointment. Like, that's a huge barrier to entry.
It really is. And the great thing about BetterHelp is that they make it easy to get started, right? It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's designed to be flexible. And it's really all about your schedule. They work with it.
There's a really short questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
You fill it out. You're matched with a licensed therapist. So these are people that know what they're doing. And you can switch therapists anytime for no charge.
Yeah, if you're not vibing with that person, find the person that you're going to vibe with. BetterHelp wants to find the right match for you.
And it's entirely possible you won't vibe with the first person. That's the other part of this entire thing, right? Is like people find a therapist finally, and they just don't have the rhythm. They don't have the vibe that it's working. So then they got to go find another one. BetterHelp makes that easier.
Just like having arm day, just like having leg day, you need a therapy day too, right?
Yeah, never skip therapy day, really.
Right.
BetterHelp helps you do that. And you can visit betterhelp.com/deviant today to get 10% off that first month.
That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/deviant.
The stories that Israel Keyes tells inside the interrogation room are, as you've heard, the stuff of nightmares. But in addition to those details, another thread unfolds over the course of those conversations. We mentioned it in episode 4, the chess match, the negotiation. It's a constant push and pull, a psychological tug of war between two sides trying to arrive at the points that they've both made clear to the other.
On one side of the table, U.S. Attorneys Kevin Feldis and Frank Russo, FBI agent Jolene Godin, and Anchorage Police Detective Jeff Bell. What they want is names, confessions. And on the other side, Israel Keyes. And what he wants, he makes that clear from the earliest days of those interviews. You've heard it before.
I want an execution date. For you? Yes. I want this whole thing wrapped up and over with as soon as possible.
With that request on the table, there's a gradual shift in the tone of what Keyes says, with how he engages with law enforcement. It becomes a game to him. Israel Keyes is bored.
From an entertainment perspective, from my perspective, yeah, it would be really fun to have all of this stuff come out. But I still think there's got to be something more that I can get out of giving more information.
The terms and power dynamics of that game, they're set early.
The first few interviews, this was obviously all new to him, interacting with law enforcement. And I think law enforcement had the upper hand initially.
You've heard FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin talk about it before.
And then as time went on, he really had the upper hand. He had all the cards, and he knew that. And we certainly controlled the interviews, but he had all the cards. It really became kind of a chess match at that point.
Here's former Anchorage Police Detective Jeff Bell again. He was one of the lead investigators in this case.
I can tell you what my opinion is on why that happened. Israel told us in an interview that he would tell us if we found out information, he would admit to it. If we were right and we had the victim, he would tell us about it. But he wasn't going to just give us a list of names and locations where these occurred. But if we could find them, he would admit to it.
Well, I would suggest that if a different jurisdiction, aside from the ones we've already talked about, contacts you with questions about me as a suspect, that you, at the least, keep an open line of communication with them so that they know that you have an open line of communication with me.
And we'll definitely do that, Israel. I'm not.
If you want to bring people in on conference calls or whatever, if they have stuff they want to ask me about, I'm fairly open to that. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, I'm going to confess everything at this point, but, I'm open to it.
We also knew that he rotated his computers every couple of years. So I believe that he knew what we weren't going to find. He knew that if we were only going to find the people he had investigated over the last 18 months or so because he had just gotten a new computer.
The typical scenario for an interview would be 2 to 3 people in the room, and then we usually had 2 to 3 people listening. And the individuals that were outside of the room, at least one of them was doing a loose transcription of the interview. They're obviously all being recorded as well. And so we would take breaks, get follow-up questions from them, because certainly they're outside, they're seeing things maybe that we're not seeing. And so, or they're letting us know of things that they're seeing to ask questions about.
For everybody that was involved, I would say it was the first and only case like that. Everybody was kind of just learning. And we did have difference of opinions and internal fights between law enforcement and prosecutions and law enforcement and law enforcement. When something big like that happens in a smaller town, even though it's the biggest town in Alaska, it gets very political, very fast. A lot of people trying to be involved, make a name for themselves. And I think everybody was trying to do the right thing in the end.
It was a constant having to reassess. Depending on what we wanted the topic to be for a given day would determine kind of how we would go at that interview. Some of them, it was Detective Bell who was going to kind of be leading it. Others, it might have been AUSA Russo, or others, it was me or, a different agent that would do it. So it really kind of depended on what we were talking about.
Is it unusual for U.S. attorneys or assistant U.S. attorneys or at the state level, ADAs or whatever they're called in Alaska, to be in the room for interrogations?
It's the only time it's ever happened with me. At a local level, that's the only case I've ever been involved where essentially they are taking a leadership role, typing a cast of what they want who to say when. It was unusual, to say the least.
It really varies. In some cases, they're involved from the get-go. And in this particular case, that initial interview, his defense attorney was there as well because he was already in custody. So it was very normal for the AUSAs to be in the room as well. So it really varies.
And I don't know whether it would have worked with Israel, but as you know, law enforcement, we can sometimes stretch the truth to try to get some information from a suspect, and the attorney cannot do that at all. But Israel was a little different in that it wasn't as much of an interrogation. An interrogation, in my opinion, is when I have some information, not all of it, but I have enough to question a suspect. Israel held all the cards because once the careers were talked about, we had no idea who or where. So it isn't like I could have said, well, you took Deborah Feldman from Hackensack, New Jersey, and you drove her here and there, because if you do that and you're wrong, you lose all credibility. And so there wasn't a lot of that I could able to do, but I do think that there were things that could have been done differently, especially like with Deborah Feldman. I still have the printout today of the transcript of the interview where he says, I'm just not ready to talk about that right now. And Kevin interrupts and says something that leads the next sentence to be, I don't know anything about it and I want to talk about it. That's where you don't want to go. I felt like we should have stopped when he was wanting to stop. He held all the cards.
No, I didn't kill her. Okay. Is there something else to the story that you're just not willing to talk about today?
I don't want to talk about it.
So
you seem conflicted with the answers. You're saying no, but you're kind of saying yes also, and so we're.
No, I never said yes.
No, but you
have to understand from my perspective. I realize now that you know a lot about the things that I've done and the places I've been on paper. And whereas I'm already, in that respect, I already feel like I'm at a disadvantage.
Kevin Feld has pushed it too far. I felt like it was a good comment saying, I don't want to talk about that right now. To me, that means I have information and I just don't want to talk about it right now. That, to me, that's an affirmative. That's a yes, I did it, because how else would he know her? And I think Kevin obviously just pushed it too far to get him to then say, well, if I have to talk about it right now, I don't know nothing about it.
Cases, suspects, they're like fingerprints. No two are the same. They require different tactics, different kinds of questioning. We've talked about Kevin Feldis a lot in this series, and we should. He was a primary figure in this case, tasked with getting it to a courtroom. We did ask Kevin Feldis for an interview. He's no longer a U.S. attorney, and he politely declined our request.
My main purpose, I think, in the interview is the same with Jolene's, and maybe mine just a little more because I was a male, is that keeping the rapport with him when we weren't talking about murders, when we were having a cigarette or smoking a cigar down in the car garage and we were talking about fishing or hunting or guns and things like that. Not necessarily be his friend, but be somebody who's not an attorney or somebody in jail that he can talk to. He had a particular interest in Americano and a coffee that he must have had on a daily basis. In fact, that's what he had Samantha making, was an Americano, so that was a little weird. But we obliged by getting him his coffee every day. He had a brand of cigars that he liked to smoke. Peanut butter Snickers was his favorite candy bar. And so, every time I went to the grocery store in the checkout stand, I would buy a couple of peanut butter Snickers. It annoyed my wife at the time that I was buying candy bars for a serial killer. But it's those small things that helped us keep the rapport with him.
That rapport, eventually, it takes a big hit.
Before I gave you the location of that house or anything, I was like, I'll give you the location of this house, but I don't want the locals involved because they didn't have any clue anyway. And next thing I know, there's like articles in the paper, like this big dig site going on. There was a lot more discreet ways to handle it. So you got your information. They went right away to the lead investigator on the case, and my name got leaked out somehow.
So it slowed to a trickle after the Courier's search went viral. We had assured him, mainly the U.S. attorneys, but we all assured him that we would do the best we could at keeping the information he gave us not public as much as we could so that it wouldn't be a big circus. And that's one of the things that he was worried about.
Throughout the negotiations, law enforcement's hopes for additional confessions and clues start to dwindle. As time goes on, getting information beyond the Couriers, beyond Samantha Koenig, and beyond Deborah Feldman is looking less likely, and patience is starting to wear thin.
The exchange you're about to hear is fairly typical of how a lot of these sessions go. You're about to meet Assistant U.S. Attorney Frank Russo. He's been in the room throughout the case, with Kevin Feldis taking the lead. There are points where everyone, including Russo, grows tired of the game. After rapport is worn thin and patience dissipates, tempers flare. Frank Russo kicks things off.
I'm just saying that I'm getting a little bit ticked off at what's happening with the information that I've already given you, and I see no reason at this point to keep giving you more information because I don't know what's going to happen with that. The whole process is, I'm getting a little bored with it.
Israel Keys grows tired of negotiating.
I mean, you're annoyed with that, the way that was handled. Quite frankly, I'm annoyed with you because you had in your power a way to stop it right here. And I came up with this plan, and you could have done it. And if you did it, we wouldn't have had a problem in Vermont last week because we would have had the authority to say
they had already leaked my name to the press
but they had
time that letter was out.
You blame us for the situation. I'm blaming you.
I do blame you. I told you from the get-go, before I told you where the freaking bodies were left, I told you that I didn't want the locals involved. And the first thing you do is make a big scene and do a big freaking archaeological dig right alongside the main road.
I mean, come on.
I think you need to back up to your recordings. Because I remember the conversation, and I said I didn't want the locals involved in it. And I know now I talked to the guy. I talked to the lead investigator. Not only did you involve him in that, but you took him to New York to dig up the guns. You had him involved from the very get-go. Now you're talking about wanting to put my name in the media, which is the one thing I didn't want from you. Don't want to do that. It's going to happen, is what you're saying.
I'm concerned it's going to happen.
If we can't get another avenue for doing it, I don't see that we have any other choice on how to investigate it.
But from our perspective, you have to see it sort of the other side of the coin. What guarantees do we have that you're going to give us the information?
You don't have any guarantees.
Remember Mary Ellen O'Toole from previous episodes? She's a former FBI profiler, and she spent hours in interrogation rooms with people just like Israel Keys. What's happening in these sessions makes sense to her. This is what serial sexual killers do.
I think he was being himself. I think he was trying to control the interview. I think he was trying to bait the investigators. I think he was playing the cat and mouse game that psychopaths can do really well. one of the other traits of a psychopathic individual is that they are extremely manipulative. It's a standalone personality trait that exists for them. And I think he was attempting to be extremely manipulative. And you can't change a personality when you're in an interview scenario. You just have to work around it. You have to exploit the personality. So I think that's what he was doing, playing the cat and mouse game, trying to manipulate the officers and the agents and playing games with them. What he doesn't understand is they've been down that road before. They've talked to psychopathic individuals.
All this drama, all this effort, all these negotiations, they do pay off. Keyes still isn't giving up new names of who he kills, but he's happy to talk about how he kills.
It's better if you control the whole situation from start to finish. You control the location, and if you wait at a location long enough, you even control who else is involved. Whereas with you going to someone's house, just a lot of aspects to it. Unpredictable, but definitely not as boring. I mean, if you're in a remote location, statistically, you've got a lot better odds.
Did you ever feel like you almost got caught before?
I felt like I was going to get caught every time. I never felt like I was going to get caught after, just usually in the planning stage. I was usually convinced that was the way it was going to go. I just always had visions of that. That would be what happened. The one bank I go in there be an off-duty cop or whatever.
You were willing to take that risk.
Right. Well, because I didn't do anything really impulsively, that's part of the reason why, up until recently, I was able to put things off until what I would think of as a more opportune time to do it, or lower risk or whatever.
And what Keyes says there holds true, until it doesn't. As we know, shortly after he kills Samantha Koenig, Keyes leaves Alaska to go on a cruise out of New Orleans. And when he gets back, he doesn't go home right away. He visits Texas to spend time with family. And it's here that he loses control for the last time. This is his final crime spasm. And like Texas, it's really, really big.
Israel's pleasure cruise returns to port on February 11th, 2012. After disembarking back in New Orleans, his girlfriend goes off on her own on a pre-planned trip, and he and his daughter drive to Texas to spend time with his family in Dallas. While he's there, he checks on Alaskan media outlets to see if there's any coverage about Samantha Koenig. There is. It's all over the place, and he loves it.
The search, the questions about what may have happened. Is she alive? He knows the answer that nobody else does. Samantha is dead, wrapped in a plastic sheet in his shed, frozen by the Alaska winter. The next moves are all his. It's here that he gets the idea to ask for a ransom. But he's not in Alaska, he's in Texas. And he starts getting antsy.
I was thinking the vacation would kind of mellow me out. And I was thinking about banks, I guess, a little bit, but I don't think I was actually I wasn't thinking seriously. It was more one of those things, if I found the ideal one, like the ideal, like one-horse town with one bank in it way out of the way. But we got back from vacation, and I got to Texas, and I was checking the Alaska news a lot, and I just got kind of amped up, I guess, and decided I wanted to go out and do something, preferably take someone, but...
So did you take someone?
No.
This is one of those moments where authorities are pretty confident he's lying. Most of what we know about these next few days comes from interviews and investigations conducted by the FBI and, of course, from Israel himself.
In the early morning hours of February 13th, Keyes leaves a note on his bed, which his daughter finds, saying that he's gone to fix his windshield and find a place to hide his guns. He gets in his rental car and just starts driving.
I was gone for a couple days, like 2 or 3 days, staying with my mom and in Dallas, and I got tired of the people there talking to me and stuff, so I just decided to get in my car and think of some excuse to go south and just drive around. So that's what I was doing.
Where'd you go?
I went down further south.
Further south than Dallas or Houston?
No, it was further south from where I ended up going to this bank. There were some banks and stuff that I was looking at.
You're out looking for a bank?
Or a house,
Or a house.
Yeah, I was just looking to do something. I was kind of out of control a little bit. Since the stuff happened in Alaska, I was kind of The way I reacted to the whole thing that happened in Alaska was a lot different.
Because I know how many miles you put on that car.
Probably a lot, right?
There's a lot of miles on that car. So that's the task that we're doing right now, is looking at all the credit cards and then bank statements and everything, trying to piece that trip together. Lots of miles on the car.
Yeah.
Like good done circles around that.
That car was, by the time I was done driving around all those back roads in Texas, that car was noticeably damaged.
One of the things that was on your phone, there's a cemetery in Texas. Did you go to a cemetery in Texas?
Mm-hmm.
What was the cemetery about? One in Glenrose? Does that sound right?
Yeah, I went to a few different cemeteries.
What did you go to the cemetery for?
I was just looking for different places, convenient locations. I went to a lot of different places because none of them really seemed like they worked out. People are very nosy in Texas, so it took me a while to find anywhere that I felt comfortable.
Did you find that place?
Well, I found a few different. I didn't take anybody on that trip, if that's what you're asking. That's what the thought process was. I didn't do it, but.
Why a cemetery? A disposal site cemetery or an abduction site?
Not an abduction site, just somewhere to take somebody. A lot of those cemeteries have maintenance sheds and stuff in them that are usually pretty easy to get into.
And pretty remote. This one's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
On the night of the 13th, Keyes texts his family, saying that he's stuck in the mud somewhere. They respond, offering to come get him, but he goes silent.
What was the whole getting stuck in the mud thing in Texas? Where was that?
Oh, that was down south. I was out looking at churches and houses.
Where did he get stuck? We don't know. He tells family that someone helped him get free, though. Later, he tells the police that he got himself out.
This becomes a major point of suspicion for law enforcement. Whatever the truth, at this point, he's in full crime wave mode.
I don't know what I was thinking. Like I said, I was kind of out of control. There was, forget the name of the town. I think it was called Glen Rose or Glen something. And I stopped at this river park, and I was just hanging out there. It was getting pretty late, and there was a woman who came, and she was going for like a walk on the trails up and down the river or something. And I almost went after her. She had a big dog with her. It was like a mastiff or something, but I was going to shoot the dog. I definitely wasn't planning things through in Texas. I was kind of just looking for something.
His family gets another text from him 24 hours later on the night of the 14th. He says that he's waiting in a mall parking lot in Cleburne, just southwest of Dallas. Can she come get him? Israel's mom and a couple of sisters pile into their van and make the hour-long drive. They get to the mall, and Israel is nowhere to be found. They decide to spend the night in the parking lot, and they sleep in their van.
The next morning, they get a call from Israel who says he's actually on the other side of the mall. He's run out of gas. Sure enough, there he is. He says that his credit cards have been frozen and that he hasn't eaten or slept in 2 days. His family helps him get gas and get back on the road. It's not until the morning of February 16th that he surfaces again at that house in Aledo, Texas, the one he burns.
So explain to us how you found this house.
Well, I was looking at banks. My thought originally was to start the fire as kind of a diversion, but then I found a place and I had some binoculars with me, so I was watching it burn and stuff, and then kind of lost track of time, and then decided it actually brought in a lot of vehicles, like brought in a lot of emergency vehicles because it ended up being a pretty big fire. So I decided it was probably better to go to a town a little ways away.
And that was Azle, right?
Yeah, where the bank was that I ended up hitting.
The surveillance photos from inside the National Bank of Texas in Azle shows a man wearing an N95 mask, safety glasses, and a white hard hat. He's wearing gloves, a blue jacket, and pointing a silver semi-automatic handgun.
He appears to have long, dark hair streaming out from behind the hard hat. Police later learn that it's a wig, or something like it.
I didn't know if you'd seen the photos for the bank robbery, but pretty good photos.
Yeah, cameras are getting better. The bag, the helmet, the dust mask, the glasses, the gloves, all that stuff went in dumpsters along the way to Houston.
But not the jacket or the gun.
No, I kept the jacket and the gun. Yeah. After I hit the bank, I stopped and got gas and waited for the cops to show up. Once I saw them all go by to the bank, then I went back out on the freeway and headed back towards Dallas. That was probably the most spur-of-the-moment thing I'd ever done.
That bank robbery in Texas, I mean, you use real hair. Where do you buy real hair?
You don't have to buy real hair to get real hair.
Fair enough, I guess.
You just take it, don't you?
Hair is free. Everything's free if you take it.
Hair is free. Everything is free if you take it. What's he talking about here? The assumption to make is easy. He took it from someone. Keyes continually denies that he killed anyone while he was in Texas on that trip.
I was thinking about taking someone too. I was looking for an abandoned house. I was looking for out-of-the-way ATMs. I was going to grab somebody from an ATM and take them to the house. But there were a lot of cops in Texas, so I guess I kind of chickened out a little bit.
The FBI isn't buying it. In documents, they say they believe he kills at least one person during this time, and there's strong suspicion about who that is.
James Lamar Tidwell goes missing from near Mount Enterprise, Texas. James was 58 at the time. He worked for an electrical company and was last seen leaving his overnight shift at around 5:30 a.m. And then nothing. He simply vanishes.
His truck is found a few days later, about 5 miles from his home. All police find are his eyeglasses. Everything else, his wallet, phone, keys, they're gone. James had long, dark, graying hair, and at work, he wore a white hard hat.
FBI documents believe that what's known about his disappearance fits Keyes' MO and movements. Jeff Bell agrees.
His cell phone is very close to Jimmy Tidwell's disappearance, and that the fire in Aledo, Texas was immediately after that, and that house was not searched adequately for remains. I don't know. I speculate that, but I would also not want to impede on an active investigation there, if there is one, into who may or may not have committed that. I was one of those that we looked at pretty hard and were pretty disappointed to find out that they kind of just did a cursory search of the house because they were aware that the owner wasn't there and that there supposedly wasn't anybody in the house, and it was hauled off in trucks before we got the information about the potential Tidwell investigation. So I don't really want to speculate on that. I have my own hunch. You probably can tell what it is, but I just don't know.
We spoke to the Rusk County Sheriff's Office to get a clear understanding of where Israel Keyes may or may not be on the suspect list in the Tidwell case. In their statement to us, they said, "We looked at him. Our belief is that he didn't have anything to do with it." They also added, "I can't be 100% on that. He took any knowledge of that to his grave."
And again, the FBI believes that Keyes murdered someone during that Texas trip. When they press him on it, he mixes his denials with evasion.
And you buried some stuff when you were there too, right?
I know what you're getting at. You know, there's some things that I haven't told you about Texas.
Because that's what jumped to my mind. I'm like, this Texas thing, there was more to the story. Like
Right, but that's not the same thing. If I choose not to talk about something, that's not the same as giving a misleading answer that could be construed as a lie. There's a lot of things I've left out, obviously. There have been some direct questions that I'm just saying my answers could have been construed as a lie or intentionally misleading, but that's not what my intent was necessarily. It's more of an issue of, do I leave it out? Do I talk about it at all? Or do I just give a yes or no answer that may not be accurate?
On the morning of February 17th, Israel Keyes says goodbye to his family and drives to Houston to drop off his rental car and fly back home to Alaska.
On his way there, he stops at a Walmart in Jacksonville, Texas. Keyes buys lubricant, air freshener, and a folding shovel. He never says why. Jacksonville is about a half-hour drive from the last known location of James Lamar Tidwell.
Next time on Deviant.
It's the final part of our exploration of Israel Keyes. Israel's time is coming to an end, but the investigation continues full throttle.
Through all the bluster, truths, half-truths, teasing, and hinting, investigators keep chasing the answer to how far Israel Keyes actually went. And our chase is about to come to an end. It's time to try and answer that question for ourselves.
Until next time, thanks for listening. Make sure to follow Deviant wherever you get podcasts. Check out our socials at deviant.podcast to see some of the things we're talking about in the show. And for behind-the-scenes material and exclusive Q&As with me and Andrew, visit our Patreon at deviantpodcast.com. Deviant is written, produced, and executive produced by Clark Goldband, Andrew Iden, and me, Dan Semitovich. Editorial and production consultation comes from the brilliant Jenny Ament, with scoring from the insanely talented Shuvo Sir. Marketing, sales, and distribution support come from our friends at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production of Cold Open Media.